back to Rogers Rulez. We're happy to have you during your lunch break, and we always appreciate you joining us here. And Ravi Lula joins us today. You hear Ravi all day, every day, Monday through Friday in the morning. He's paired up with DB on ESPN Radio, ESPN 590, locally in Omaha. But if you're catching us on YouTube, who knows where you are? But you can always catch the podcasts where Ravi does his thing on Hurrdat Sports podcast channels. That's the podcast app. You can find it on Spotify. You can find the whole show on YouTube. If you want to go back and watch it after this, we're going to give you a little bit more of Ravi outside of his Nebraska umbrella. And Ravi, it's a big time of year for you because not only are you just absolutely killing it heading into the summer stretch when nothing is going on, but it's the NBA playoffs. And this is your baby. The NBA is your kid.
Yeah, you know what I actually like even more than the playoffs, weirdly enough, is the NBA draft.
And that's right around the corner.
Huge draft nerd, right? So I am all about that. I do love the playoffs. I'm not one of those people that doesn't actually like basketball. I just like the transactions, but I love the draft. I like scouting guys. Even nobody asks me. They don't need to know. But I like scouting. I like figuring out who I think is going to be good, finding my little sleepers and whatever. So I'm a huge draft nerd. So this is like my sweet spot. It's you got playoffs, you got a draft. It's everything that I love about basketball.
So, Ravi, this is great because we have two guys in town that are headed to the NBA draft and should get a solid look. That's Baylor Scheierman and Trey Alexander. Keisei Tominaga situation, do we know that yet? Is he going back to Japan? Is that
I don't think he got the invite for the combine. I would imagine he's going to head back to Japan, and he's got a pretty, I think, lucrative career waiting for him there, which is awesome. I just don't think he's got the physical kind of requirements that he would need for his skill set to be in the NBA. But I think he's going to make a pretty good living playing overseas, which is, and his potential in terms of, endorsements, marketing, all that kind of stuff in Japan. He's already a superstar over there. So it's off the charts for him. And even if he, you're going to have to weigh it like, okay, yeah, you've got the NBA dream, but you kind of have to weigh it against, all right, do I want to struggle in the G League and do this and whatever, or do I just want to go be a superstar where I'm from? It's pretty appealing to go the Japan route if you're Keisei, and it seems like that's what he's going to do.
Well, he's already a superstar in the States. He peaked here in college, so it's not like he's going to have any issue, as you said, to find a way to make a living comfortably wherever he decides to play basketball. But let's go back to Scheierman and Alexander for a moment, because I was looking at mock drafts yesterday, and then when you're just sitting in bed, you're scrolling, I scroll Facebook Watch because I'm weird and like 80. But Instagram Reels finds its way in there. And then I go over to Twitter, and then I'm back on Instagram. I never make my way to TikTok for whatever reason. But I think I was on Facebook Watch, which sounds so bad coming out of my mouth.
Yeah, you sound like 100 years old. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody that doesn't have grandchildren that's like just scrolling Facebook Watch. I don't know what's happening there. You work in social media for a living, man. Like, what are you doing?
Here we go. I like Impractical Jokers is my first one here. Then you have Seinfeld. I'm a big Seinfeld nut. Here's pitcher accused of cheating via his hair, a breakdown. This is what I watch.
You're 90 years old. You're 90 years old.
This is what I watch. It is hilarious. King of Queens. Even the shows I'm watching make me 90 years old.
Yeah, you might be the oldest 26-year-old in the world.
Probably.
If it was on CBS in the 90s, Andrew's into it.
With a large lacking of knowledge in history. Like, I may be old, and people may think I should have lived through a stretch of time, but I don't know anything about this certain event. I could tell you about Prohibition. I don't know if that's just because I have an infatuation for bootleggers, but I can do a little bit, not everything. We found out when I was on the show with Ravi, we found out that, and I still don't even know the nuclear power plant that
Chernobyl. That's what I was Chernobyl.
Chernobyl. Yeah,
have you watched the miniseries yet?
If you asked me to write a paper on it, Ravi, I would fail. I have yet to watch it, but I'm going to.
It's so good.
I'll watch my homework. I will watch the Chernobyl series, and the next time we have Ravi on, which will probably be in 20-something episodes, we'll go back through it and review it because we're going to be in the middle of summer and needing something to talk about right before Dylan Raiola leads Nebraska to a national championship, and we'll be good. We'll be all set.
It's so good. You got to do it. It's only like 5 episodes. It's like an evening. Just get through it.
Fair enough. Once, you know what? Maybe it's a honeymoon thing. We're out.
That might kill the vibe. I'm gonna be honest. It's gonna kill the vibe. Wait till you're home. Wait till
you don't know what excites Ashley. Ashley's like, find me something that explodes.
No shame. Do whatever need to.
So let's Chernobyl on our honeymoon.
We'll open the sliding door. We'll look at the ocean and think, gosh, good thing we aren't there.
Good thing nuclear winter isn't here. Yeah.
It's the world's first Chernobyl kink. I didn't know that was a thing, but no shame.
We'll find out. Who knows? She'll probably be disinterested right when I turn it on the TV, which is expected, right? It would be expected. So going back to these guys in the draft, though, I was looking at these mock drafts, and I saw that Baylor Scheierman in the one I was watching. Now, I've been looking at other ones just to compare, but in one of them, he was ahead of Trey Alexander. He was a first-round pick to the Knicks at like pick 25. And Trey, I'm fairly certain people are like, hey, he's going to the Bucks. Like, he's going to the Bucks at 35. He's going to the Bucks at 35. 3 or 4 mock drafts I looked at had Trey at the Bucks. And then Scheierman was fluctuating. But does it surprise you that Scheierman is ahead of Trey Alexander?
So not really. Scheierman had a way better year than Trey did. I think last year Trey was seen as a prospect, but Trey struggled at times during the course of the year. Obviously, he had some really good stretches as well, but Scheierman had a great season for his NBA draft stock. And the big thing to me is if you look at Trey, there's probably not one thing that he does at like a super elite level, right? His size is pretty good, not great. His athleticism is average, maybe slightly above average. Good shooter, not a great shooter. Good ball handler, not a great ball handler. And like that starts to work against you, being kind of a jack of all trades, master of none, starts to work against you in the NBA draft. Whereas Baylor, at the very least, you are getting an elite shooter with real size, right? 6'7", shoots like he does not grow on trees, right? So he may be, and I don't even want to say limited because he's a really great passer, obviously, as well. But he may not be a super high upside guy, which is typically what you see in the first round of the NBA draft. But as you get to those later picks where you're talking about like playoff teams and things like that, a lot of times they're looking for an instant impact guy. So a guy like Baylor that has a pretty polished game, ready to go, can be an extra ball handler, makes sense if they're trying to be like, hey, we need a guy that can come in off the bench, like a 7th or 8th guy, come in, give us 15, 20 minutes a game and be a spark or be able to hold over until the first unit comes back in. Baylor actually, I think, has the easier projection because of the size and the shooting. Trey at one or more of those categories, whether it's shooting or ball handling, because he's probably a little undersized for a 2. He's probably not quite polished enough in ball handling and passing to be a 1, and he doesn't have the elite athleticism to probably be a 1 at his size either. So he's going to have to work on some things. That's not to say he can't succeed at the NBA level, but I think there was less of a jump for him between his sophomore and junior year, and so there's still some question marks left out there. But the other thing that's important to remember here is, depending on the draft, you've got guys between picks like 20 and 40 to 50 sometimes that are all kind of the same range type of guy, right? Like there's, like one team might just be infatuated. You mentioned the Bucks and Trey Alexander. Like they might just be infatuated with Trey Alexander and nobody else would take him at 35, but the Bucks are in love with him. And so they end up, it's a lot of like beauties in the eye of the beholder once you get out of the lottery, and especially as you get to late first round and anywhere into the second. You get to like late second, you're mostly talking about flyers on guys, but like mid first to mid second is a total crapshoot based on what people like and what people see. So nothing really surprises me there because, I could see Zach Edey going like 15th. I could see him going 40th, right? There's That's a guy who's a really hard projection into today's NBA. And it's really going to be, we think we can use this guy in X way, or, we think we see value here because of ABC. And Baylor and Trey are both very much those types of prospects.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because there was a lot there. And at first I'm like, I kind of want to push back on the fact that you were saying just because Baylor had a better year kind of shows why he's getting a little more love in terms of the draft pick department. But then you started to expand on it, and I'm like, and it led me to just like, I had a bunch of thoughts on my mind. For one, I was trying to compare it, and maybe it's unfair to compare it like this, and it may not even be a correlation. But if I'm thinking about the NFL draft, because that's what I'm most familiar with over the NBA, and you think about Caleb Williams' season. Now, obviously the number one pick, and this is apples and oranges. This isn't comparable. But number one pick didn't have a good season. But because of his elite prospect showing in all departments, that's what still solidified him as the number one pick. Is that different in the NBA? Because Trey is a better, quote unquote, NBA prospect, because he kind of offers you a lot. And what you read, what you see, that's what people tell you. Versus Baylor is great in that one department, which is shooting, but he's picked up on a couple of other things. Is it not like a correlation like it is in the NFL, where it's all based on what type of prospect you are?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of things there that are key differences between like the NFL and the NBA in terms of the way they view prospects. For Trey specifically, there were questions that people wanted to have answered, like, can he be a primary ball handler? Can he initiate his own offense regularly and get to his spots and score and things like that? And he didn't answer those questions to the same degree. So when I talk about Baylor had a better season than Trey did, I mean, he had a better season answering the questions that the NBA scouts had.
1,000%. 1,000%.
Yeah, as opposed to like, he had a better year, so he's got more shine now. And it's not really about that. It's about, people were kind of wondering about like Baylor's athleticism. He showed up this year, had really worked on his body, looked more athletic, was dunking pretty regularly,
and getting into the paint.
Yes, got to the paint more, was a better defender, was engaged and active, and didn't look overmatched at the three. Like, there's that. It is what I mean by he had a better year, is he answered way more questions about his NBA status than Trey did. Trey left too many questions out on the table, so now that's affecting him. So it's less about, Baylor put up 18 points a game and whatever, and he only put up 9 or 10, or not 10, 9 or 10, like 14 or 15 or whatever Trey had. It's about, hey, Baylor went out from the feedback he got last year and got way better in all these areas, and Trey still has or answer questions there.
But I'll tell you, the point that you made about 25 to 40 is so accurate when it comes to basketball. Because once you get out of that first window of, okay, these are your lottery picks, these are the guys, these are not only the top guys you saw in college basketball this season, but the ones that are coming from overseas and other leagues. And that's the crazy thing about the NFL, the NBA draft too, is you look at like the top 7 picks, and it's not like you get into a Donovan Clingan until about pick 7 and 8. And I can't remember who comes before, but most of these guys aren't guys you saw in college, which I think are even more unique into the aspect of how much more research you have to do to figure out who this guy even is. Look at the number one pick. If you ask the average basketball fan, they're not going to know who that guy is. They're not going to know anything about him.
Yeah, it's usually it's not consensus, but most people think it's going to be Alex Sarr out of Perth. He played for Perth in Australia this last year. And, it's funny because when you look at these super young guys' numbers in these pro leagues, I think he averaged like 10 points and 5 rebounds a game in Australia. And people are like, oh, wow, how's that going to be the number one pick? It's like, well, he's playing professionally at like 17 or 18 years old. It's a whole, like the numbers don't translate like that in the foreign leagues and stuff. But you're right. There's probably 4 or 5 of the top 7 or 8 picks that are going to be overseas guys. You've got Rob Dillingham from Kentucky is going to be up there. The other Kentucky guy, Reed Shepherd's going to be up there. and then the two UConn guys, Klingen and Stefan Castle, are probably going to all be in like the top 8 to 10. Other than that, you're probably talking about 5 or 6 guys from overseas that are really your high-level draft picks. And so, yeah, for an average fan, it is kind of tough sometimes because you do have to go out. Like, you weren't watching Perth during the regular season.
You weren't? I was.
No, I had to go back and catch up on my guy Alex Sarr. Like
all those 3 a.m. mornings watching Perth basketball.
I will say, when LaMelo went to New Zealand, I did watch some of those because I was just curious. I was like, "What's happening here?" Because he was still in high school when he did it.
Mm-hmm.
So like, I'm a bigger nerd than most people when it comes to that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's a lot of unfamiliarity with the top guys in the draft. This isn't like a Victor Wembanyama when like everybody knew for years that guy was going to be the number 1 pick as soon as he was eligible to come over. Like Alex Sarr isn't that. That's not to say that he's not going to be a good player, but like Wembanyama is a generational prospect. I don't, what he turns into as an NBA player will depend mostly on health. I think if he's healthy, like he's going to be an all-timer. But we just haven't seen that body type before, right? Alex Sarr is more of a traditional, he's like 6'11", kind of the new hybrid type of big. But
this Yahoo Sports has him at 7'1", 205. And I don't know if this is the high school program or what, but he's somewhere around that height range.
Yeah, he's like around 7 feet. I think the Ringer has him at like 6'11". I don't know. Like none of those, especially those 7-footers. Like you have the ones that want to be 7 foot but aren't, and then you have like KD who's like actually 7'1". Is like, no, I'm 6'10". It's like, no, you're not. Stop it. So like, the heights are always kind of a moving target, but it's a really strange draft because I don't think people are enamored with really anybody at the top. There's guys they like, but I don't think they look at anyone and say like, that's a number 1 guy. Like there's no, like I said, there's no Wembanyama up there. There's no Zion Williamson up there. There's not a guy where you just look at and say, hey, when you win the lottery, you actually won the lottery, right? Like the Hawks got the number 1 pick and moved up a bunch of spots, but now they're sitting there and be like, okay, who helps us a lot here? They might be better off, not that they need a ton of pieces, but they might be better off seeing if somebody else falls in love with Alex Sarr or somebody else at the top and trading out of there for real pieces because their timeline is going to be different than going and getting a 19-year-old that played in Australia next year. Like if you want to maximize on this like DeMonte Murray, Trey Young kind of core that you're working with, you probably need a guy that's more ready to play than that. So it'll be interesting to see what they end up doing because this year that number, I said 25 through 40, that number might creep even higher into the first round because I think it's a deep draft. I don't think the top end is really there the way it is some years.
Yeah, and I like how you put Wembanyama as okay. This guy is going number 1. This is your number 1 pick. When Markelle Fultz came out of college, everyone was like, it's him. It's going to be this guy.
Which I never understood, to be honest with you.
Neither could I. But this is how the NBA works. People just decide things for me, and I'm like, okay.
I guess he's pretty good, but like as I watch him, I was like, does no one care that his Washington team went like 9-20?
Well, that's like Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons was the same way.
Yeah, except at least Ben Simmons made like the NIT. They were like 17-15. Like Fultz's Washington team was legitimately bad.
Yeah, they were. They weren't very good.
And so it's like, you can't give me to an NIT as the number 1 pick. Like, I don't feel great there.
But I'm looking at the NFL draft now, and this is I haven't gotten I haven't had a chance to really talk about it with anybody.
Let's get into it.
Nobody has been like, oh, I watch a ton of this, or I am a draft nerd this, and I'm like, well, I know somebody that is a draft nut, and I'm going to talk to him here very soon. And I got to tell you, Ravi, as a Bears fan, I couldn't be happier with how this team is looking going into this season.
For sure.
I couldn't be happier. Yeah. And you know me, I was off of the Justin Fields train probably 2-3 months before the draft, before other people were. And I was like, hey, Caleb Williams, I'm going with the prospect because one, Justin Fields, I don't really know what age he is physically. Is he the 24, 25-year-old that he's on paper, or is his body actually 28, 29 because of all the shots that he's taken in his rookie contract? Yeah. And then the second thing was, well, you've already seen that you can't win a Super Bowl with Justin Fields. What do you lose by taking Caleb Williams? You lose absolutely nothing. Now you're buying into somebody else who you think this is our Super Bowl winning quarterback. If you're not going to play Fields like you think Fields should get played, you have to go and just take this guy, whether you really want to or not. It's kind of like the Raiders, right? When the Raiders got Brock Bowers to fall to their pick, they didn't need a tight end. They have a pretty decent tight end that they drafted in the second round last year. But when Brock Bowers is there, you take Brock Bowers. It's just the natural feeling. But as I look through the draft, outside of what the Bears did, I'm like, wow, this is a loaded field. Like this when you talk about a loaded draft, this is what you get. Next year's draft is not going to look anywhere near as nice as this one. So buying while you can is interesting. The one pick that shocked me is your boy Michael Penix.
See, so it shocked me a little bit, but I mean, he was going to go somewhere between like 8 and 12, probably 8 and 13 at the lowest. He wasn't getting past the Raiders at 13. The one that shocked me was Bo Nix at 12. That was a guy that most people had as a late first at the earliest. A lot of people had him in that like 30 to 40 range. That's the one that really shocked me. Now, it shocked me a little bit because of where Penix went in terms of going to Atlanta. But in terms of his range in the draft, that's about where he had kind of landed. I do love Michael Penix, though. I have said this a million times. I would take him over everybody except for Caleb Williams in this draft. I love the way he throws the ball. He's mature. He's played a ton of college football, which generally does translate to early success in the NFL. This dude had 1 million starts, even though he was banged up in Indiana a bunch, had 2 full healthy seasons. And this dude's arm talent, like if it weren't for the injury problems earlier with his career in Indiana, this dude would have been probably in that same conversation as Jaden Daniels and Drake May. There would not have been a ton of separation between those 2, 3, and 4 guys. And because of the injuries, and maybe that's what it was with Atlanta, right? Is they just saw him the way I saw him and were like, hey, this is the second best guy in the draft. If he's sitting there at 8, like, what are we supposed to do? Not take this guy that we're in love with just because we signed a 35-year-old who's coming off an Achilles? Like, no, we're going to go ahead and take that guy still. So I do think the destination's a little surprising, but I don't think the range is.
And that's a good point. I didn't really think about that too much, but I also thought people would trade up with like the Bears to get Michael Penix. So maybe just because the Falcons took him, that's all that I look into over anything else. But I wanted to ask you this because, you know, you look at 6 quarterbacks going in the first 12 picks, which is crazy. First time in history that's happened. If you had to rank these quarterbacks 1 to 6, let's say all of them are going to start day one. We know Michael Penix isn't, but just for the sake of the example and scenario, let's build a top 6. Would you have drafted these guys in that order?
No, I'd have taken Penix too. I'd have gone Caleb Williams, Michael Penix. I really struggle with Jaden Daniels versus Drake May because Jaden Daniels was obviously hugely productive his last year at LSU. But, man, he had some really iffy tape at ASU and even into his first year at LSU. That's hard to unsee for me sometimes. Like, I just have a hard time shaking that. Kind of like it was hard for some people to shake Drake May's most recent year when he had the really good year 2 years ago, right? So, to me, I would probably go Caleb Williams, Michael Penix, Drake May, Jaden Daniels. I'm missing some of the J.J. McCarthy, and then Bo Nix, like gap, big gap, Bo Nix. I don't put Bo Nix in the category as those same. Obviously, he got drafted there, so we have to have the conversation. But to me, those 5 guys, there's a gap of probably 10 to 15 picks at least, and then Bo Nix goes there for me.
Well, so I'm gonna tell you something here for a sec because I am completely against your Bo Nix thought. If there's anybody that shouldn't be there, it's J.J. McCarthy. He should not be that high. J.J. McCarthy, what did he offer anyone in terms of looking at you from top to bottom as a prospect? I can't think of one thing that J.J. McCarthy does better than any other quarterback in this draft. I can't. And the second point there, I can't think of what J.J. McCarthy offered Michigan that made him stand out as the 5th best quarterback in this draft. At Michigan, J.J. McCarthy wasn't the man. Like, he didn't make that offense go. He may have been the quarterback, but he didn't make the offense go. The running backs made that offense go. And that offensive line allowed a lot of things to create, to allow J.J. McCarthy to create something spectacular. But J.J. McCarthy never, ever wowed me, ever. And that defense at Michigan is what won them a national title, too. We can't think of that J.J. McCarthy is the reason. Jim Harbaugh, that defense, that running game is the reason that they win title. And Connor Stallions is the reason that they win titles in Michigan. It's not J.J. McCarthy. So for me, I don't mind you putting Michael Penix high because I'm just as high on Michael Penix as you are. He throws the best ball out of anybody in this draft.
Yeah, I think he really does.
His injury history, I can see how that leaves an uneasy feeling in the stomach of a GM. I would probably go Caleb, Jaden, Penix. And this is not because I think Jaden is better than Penix for X, Y, and Z reason. Penix has a little bit more age. I don't think it's a lot. Maybe a year or two on Jaden.
Yeah, Jaden's actually pretty old. Yeah.
It could be pretty close because, I mean, Jaden's been – when they were showing his highlight throwing a touchdown to Brandon Ayuk on draft night, I fell out of my chair. I really did. I'm like, oh, my God.
I think it's a year because I think Jaden played 5 and Penix played 6.
But the injuries are what scare me a little bit. Not a lot, just a little bit. So I would have Jaden at 2, Penix at 3. I would put Drake May at 4. Bo Nix would be 5 for me, and JJ falls off a cliff.
Yeah, so I'll push back on the JJ thing a little bit just because I do think he unlocked some things for the running game that, like, obviously, like a Cade McNamara didn't. Cade McNamara to me is like the epitome of like average quarterback play.
Yeah, an Iowa quarterback.
Like dead average quarterback, right? And that's fine, right? And he got them to a playoff. I understand that. Like that's a fine way to, or he got them to 11-0. I don't remember how they ended that season. I think they got to a playoff his first year, and he couldn't get them over the hump, right? J.J. McCarthy is the reason they got over the hump. Like, yes, they went in 11-0 because of the defense and the running game and Jim Harbaugh and Connor Stallions and whatever else, right? Not Connor Stallions. J.J. McCarthy is the reason they went from 11-0 getting bounced in the semis to winning a national title. He opened up some things for them that weren't there before that made them that much harder to defend and all those other plays. I agree with you. He wasn't asked to do a ton. The things that he did do, he did really well. NFL GMs are always going to fall in love with guys that win a ton. And he actually does have really good arm talent. He's a good athlete for being a prototypically sized quarterback. My concern with J.J. McCarthy is, and we get this on Jaden Daniels a lot, is he's a real slight guy. Like he's not a big guy for how much he runs. Like J.J. McCarthy is not a super broadly built dude. Like he's not a big guy. And so that would be my big concern with JJ is I'd be a little more concerned about injuries than people seem to be.
So I'm looking at the comparisons because, it's on the internet, so it's true. The comparisons
obviously
for all these quarterbacks. Caleb Williams is compared to Aaron Rodgers, according to ESPN. Jaden Daniels is compared to Lamar Jackson. That makes sense. Drake May, Justin Herbert. I think that may be a little generous.
Maybe.
You look at Michael Penix, Tua Tagovailoa. I don't know if that's just because they're both southpaws, but they can both throw the ball pretty deep. And I can see how there's a comparison there. Bo Nix is compared to Dak Prescott. And your boy, JJ McCarthy, your boy, JJ, I'm saying your boy.
Uh-oh.
It's Jake Plummer.
Hey, man, Jake the Snake had it for a little bit. I think.
And there is the key point there, a little bit.
I mean, there's definitely, like, here's the thing, though. So we go through this list of 6 guys, right? At least half of them are going to be busts. Like, we just know that. Half of them are going to be busts. So if J.J. McCarthy turns into Jake Plummer, win. That's a win. It just is.
Is it though? You let go of Kirk. You could have just re-signed Kirk and just said, okay, we'll wait another 3 years.
Let's start putting all the pieces together to this puzzle, right? So they let go of Kirk. What do we know about Kirk Cousins? Minnesota would have had his medicals. They know more about that injury than probably anybody, and they decided to let him go and not pay him that money. Is it a money decision? Is it a health decision? We don't know, okay? But then he gets into Atlanta's rooms and he signs that big contract, and they're the team that knows the second most about his injury now, and they surprisingly draft a quarterback at 8. Maybe Kirk Cousins' Achilles recovery is not going the way that people would like it to. Maybe there's a reason Penix went 8, and it's because we're assuming Kirk Cousins starts week 1. Maybe that thing's not coming along the way they want it to. Maybe Minnesota knew that, and they're like, hey, we're not going to pay to take that risk. Maybe Atlanta found that out after they paid to take that risk, and they're like, we need an insurance policy ASAP and draft Michael Penix. That, to me, is I think a plausible scenario here in why Minnesota lets him go and why Atlanta unexpectedly drafts a quarterback after paying this man $180 million. All that to say, I think we're maybe not giving Jake Plummer enough credit, if that's the comp.
There he goes. He's back on Jake.
Jake the Snake, listen, there's late 90s Jake the Snake. He was really good in a really terrible situation in Arizona. Mm-hmm. That was a dumpster franchise when he got there. And I believe he got him to a playoff berth with Aeneas Williams back in the day. And then he went and had a pretty good run in Denver after.
Yeah, 5 seasons?
Yeah, listen, not everybody's going to be Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady and play for 20 years. That's
not everybody's going to be Caleb Williams. I'm with you.
I think there's a reason he was the consensus number 1 is because people are betting on him the most to be that type of guy. And I'm not disagreeing with it. Is he a little quirky? Sure. But I'll take his kind of quirkiness or mannerisms or whatever over a guy that's going to be at the top of a lot of draft, not at the very top, but in the top 5 or 10 or however many of a lot of draft boards next year. And Shedeur Sanders, who is just this walking red flag. I would take the guy painting his nails over Shedeur going out there and trashing FCS, teammates that are playing in the FCS now. What are we doing?
Look, you don't have to talk to me about Shedeur. You don't have to.
It's always going to come back to Dion with me.
You don't have to convince me that Shedeur is going to turn whatever franchise he ends up on into a dumpster fire. You don't have to convince me of that.
It's going to be a circus.
It really will be a circus. You will have to convince me that J.J. McCarthy is going to be something. And I hope he is something. Don't get me wrong, because you know me, a big fantasy guy. In my dynasty leagues, I own Justin Jefferson. I need J.J. McCarthy to be a superstar there.
And that's the other thing about J.J. McCarthy, right? He's actually in a pretty good situation. He's got some receiving talent. He's got a good head coach and a good offensive-minded head coach. He's in a place where he could be successful. And he's not in one of those. And the same thing with Caleb Williams, honestly. The Bears roster over the last couple of years has gotten so much better. That's legitimately a good roster at this point.
Night and day.
You add Caleb Williams and Roma Dunze, you fill a couple of piece of holes where you're like, oh, okay, now we're in business here. He and JJ, Penix, if he starts right away, also might be in the best positions of anyone in this draft to be successful, because unlike so many number 1, number 2, super high quarterback draft picks, they're going to places that aren't total dumpster fires right now. The difference between CJ Stroud and Bryce Young is Carolina's a dumpster fire and Houston's not. That's D'Amico Ryans turned Houston into not a dumpster fire overnight, and Dave Tepper can't stop lighting his team on fire for Carolina. That to me is going to be the biggest, usually this is my big thing. Most quarterbacks aren't talented enough to overcome their circumstances. Most of them just aren't. So you have to go to a place that is not a total dumpster fire in order to do that. And those 3 guys, especially, are in the best positions to be successful.
And if you look at the Bears, and I know we're talking a lot about the NFC North and my team's the Bears, we can talk about Ravi's wide receiver pick in just a moment. But when you look at the Bears, you can't tell me that if you put the Chiefs as the best team in football, and then you put I don't know if there's a trio of San Francisco, Baltimore, and Buffalo. If we're still considering those tier 2 teams, the Bears are a tier 3 team going into this season. Yeah, you can't tell me that the Packers are better than the Bears. You can't tell me that. You can't tell me that the Lions are better than the Bears on paper. You can't tell me that the Vikings are better than the Bears on paper. Now, we don't know what it looks like yet, but if we're just looking at the paper rosters.
Yeah, I would maybe push back on the Lions because they've actually had some success. But other than that, I don't disagree. Like the Lions are the only one where I sit there and like, okay, they've actually built and put together a good roster and they have some proven quarterback play. But everybody else that you're talking about, like, yeah, I agree. Even you want to throw like the Eagles in there, a team that was considered incredibly talented
Miami
2 years ago. And then we see Miami's a good one. You see the wheels fall off in Philly though. And like, okay, all of a sudden is Jalen Hurts that guy? And here's the other thing you have to ask yourself. Of those teams that you just mentioned, which one of them would take Caleb Williams over their current starter? Because I bet you Green Bay does. I know they are all about Jordan Love right now. If you're like, hey, Jordan Love for Caleb Williams straight up tomorrow, that trade is done before you can hang up the phone, right? If you tell now with Jared Goff, I don't know, because Jared Goff has been highly productive at the NFL level already.
And he just re-signed for $212 million.
You're 170 guaranteed. That's a huge number.
Yeah. Hey, good for him. Good for him.
And he's been like, I know he gets a lot of crap for the way it ended in LA. He's been hugely productive. Like for the majority of his NFL career, he's got like a really good body of work. So you can't look at that guy and just automatically take Caleb Williams over it. You look at Caleb and go, yeah, higher upside, but there's also bust potential there. Like we don't know that it's going to work. We already know that Jared Goff works as a high level winning NFL quarterback. We don't really know that about Jordan Love. You have a 1-season sample size. You don't know that about J.J. McCarthy, obviously. You've got a one-off season with Jalen Hurts. I'm not sure that you would like. I think Philly fans would trade Jalen Hurts for Caleb Williams tomorrow. I really do. So basically, the tiers that we're talking about here are people that wouldn't trade their quarterback for Caleb Williams for people that would trade their quarterback for Caleb Williams. That's the difference we're talking about.
And I'll tell you, Ravi, one more thing on this before we move forward. The reason I find some equivalence between Detroit and Chicago is Chicago's defense. It's much better than Detroit's, much better. And so even if you give the offense the edge in Detroit, if we're trying to even out the scale and you give the Bears the edge in the defensive department, that's why I don't see a lot of change in terms of, yeah, this is getting me 1 or 2 more wins here, or this is getting me 1 or 2 more wins there. So the Bears are just, I don't know how they did it. I mean, yes, they added a lot of pieces, but they're already up there with this looks like a playoff team. Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Rome Odunze. They get DeAndre Swift. You have Cole Kmet on a longer deal after re-signing him last year, and you got Caleb Williams. You have a really good defense, which I did not think, and you know me, I'll be the first to admit it. I did not think they should have signed Sweat. I don't think they should have. I don't think they should have signed him.
We talked about it. We talked about it on the show.
Because it didn't seem like they were going to be a playoff team. But here they are. On paper, it looks, if they stay healthy, it looks good.
Yeah, and obviously it's if they stay healthy and if Caleb Williams is who we think he is, right? Like that's the big question mark. And to me, that's the only reason I take Detroit over Chicago at this point, because I know I have more answers that I know about Detroit, right? I know things about Detroit that I'm projecting with Chicago. I like the projections for sure. And I think you're right. On paper, I look at Chicago as a playoff team. But I look at Detroit and I go, I know that's a playoff team. I just saw it, right? I know that because they went up on 3 touchdowns on a really good 49ers team in the NFC Championship. Like I know what that team is and what they're capable of, whereas I'm just projecting with Chicago. So I think talent-wise, you're probably right. Not a ton of difference. And if the projection goes the way you want it to, they might be better than Detroit, whether it's next year or the year after, but pretty soon here. But to me, I just have to give the edge to the thing I've already seen work in the NFL.
Ricky Pearsall at 31. Do you like Tyler Boyd? Because if I'm San Francisco and I see that my first round pick embodies who Tyler Boyd is on the Bengals, you have to be pretty okay with that, because it's not like yes, would you like a number 1? Sure, but you don't need a number 1.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. And I think it's good insurance because you don't totally know what's going to happen with the Brandon Ayuk situation. They already paid Debo, but he's been banged up some. I think it's good to have an insurance policy there at wide receiver. And he kind of signals a shift away from sort of the yak type receivers that they'd been accumulating before, where Brock Purdy's allowed them to have more of a precision passing game than they were planning on having with Trey Lance, or that they probably had with Jimmy Garoppolo. Like Brock Purdy can run an offense in a way that those guys couldn't. Obviously, Trey Lance doesn't have a starting job. He can't run an offense at that level, at least not that we've seen in the NFL. And so I think Ricky Pearsall kind of signals a shift into, hey, this is a guy that is like in that intermediate range like 7 to 15 yards can always get open. And that's a hugely valuable thing in the NFL, especially when you have a quarterback that can deliver the ball there. If he's playing for someone that it's all like bombs or bust in terms of getting that passing game going, probably not a great pick and not that valuable to them. But for a guy like Brock Purdy, who probably needs a guy like that, that's maybe something that wasn't a true skill set, Ayuk probably leans that direction. But to have another guy that can work the middle of the field, work that intermediate range as part of their offense is going to be hugely valuable to them, because that means you stay on the field on more third downs, you extend more drives. The defense, as it ages, gets more rest, has to do less to keep that team propped up. And I think it's a good pick. I hope it doesn't mean that they're getting rid of Brandon Ayuk or that they have to move on from him. But I think it's smart either way. If you keep him, you end up having a really deep, really talented wide receiver room with kind of a diverse skill set. And if you do have to move on from him, you're not left out in the cold trying to figure out what to do.
Now tell me, I'm scrolling through the draft right now. I'm in round 2, I'm in round 3, I'm in round 4. Who was Ravi's steal of the draft?
Oh, I think you could probably guess. I think he goes to a school that I have an affinity for outside of Nebraska.
Cooper DeJean, Iowa.
No, that's your guy.
Yeah,
that's
and
your random affinity. Well, not random. You know.
Yeah, I have a emotional connection to that too. But I also think he was the steal of the draft for Philadelphia. Cooper should not have fallen to pick.
No, he's a first rounder. He's a first rounder.
He should not have fallen that low. So if I'm making any sort of comp early on to this claim, it would be Cooper DeJean for me. But I'll give you one a little bit later. But I want to hear yours.
Yeah, so I've got a couple guys that I really like. 2 of them are from that school that I've got a little bit of affinity for. The other one, I just think he's a really good player and probably should have been a first rounder. So mine are Keon Coleman from Florida State, their wide receiver. I thought he was – I know that he didn't run really well, but that's a dude that just goes up and win 50-50 balls. Like, he catches everything. That's a dude that if you've got a quarterback, which they do in Buffalo, I don't know if Josh Allen is quite precise enough to take full advantage of Keon Coleman, but if he throws up some YOLO balls, like, Keon Coleman's going to go get them more often than not. And that's kind of, Josh Allen does have that tendency a little bit. So I actually think Keon Coleman, excuse me, not Keenan Allen, that's your guy. Keon Coleman.
I'll take them both.
Man, Keon Coleman's a ball player. Like, if he's had some of the most ridiculous catches, he had like a one-hander over the middle against Virginia that I had to watch like 100 times. I still don't know how he caught it. It was incredible. And like, yeah, he may not create a ton of separation. You don't see him getting caught very often either. So he's got what I call football speed. I mean, everybody calls it that. It's not like a Ravi thing. He's got football speed. He's not getting caught a ton, and he's going to catch everything. So that's one of them. I really like Johnny Newton, the defensive lineman out of Illinois. That guy's a first rounder to me. Like, that should have been a first rounder. Super talented guy. I think
just shows how loaded this draft was.
Especially like there's a lot of really good D linemen in this class. My last guy, also a D lineman, Braden Fisk out of Florida State. Really, really good D lineman. Maybe was the best defensive player at the Senior Bowl. Super disruptive, great motor, really, really athletic and powerful. Like, that's a guy that's going to cause problems, and a great second round pick. Like, he was before the Senior Bowl, I think people had him projected in like the 4th round. He vaulted himself up and was pretty darn near a first round pick because of how well he tested, and people saw him in the Senior Bowl and then started looking at the tape and they're like, holy cow, like, we knew about Jared Verse. We didn't know about this guy.
There's a couple that I like too. A 5th round pick from your school, your affinity school.
Jordan Travis
to the Jets. I think that is a huge quarterback steal in this draft. In a draft that saw 6 quarterbacks go in the first 12 picks, and Jordan Travis falls all the way to pick, or in the 5th round to the Jets, Jets, and he's learning under Aaron Rodgers. Look, Jordan Travis, if he stayed healthy, we know Florida State should have been in the college football playoff last year, and a lot of that was because of him. So
he's probably a 3rd round pick if he doesn't have the knee injury.
Easy. Yeah. I think that was a huge steal for the Jets to have him fall all the way to the 5th round. I also, and I'm stealing this from Field Yates, but the Bears offensive tackle from from Yale that they got in the third round. He called him the steal of the draft. And I'm like, oh, that makes me feel good. So I'm not going to say that that's my steal because it is my team. But if you really look at the top end of the second round, I mean, you brought up Keon Coleman's name. You just kind of fall down the list and you see Jonathan Brooks from Texas and you're like, what about that ACL injury? What's that going to do to him? But the landing place for him in Carolina, I think, is so nice for Bryce Young. He needs weapons, for one. Yes. But two, he also needs a good running back, and they did not have that last year. Miles Sanders is not it. Chuba Hubbard is not it. But Jonathan Brooks can show you flashes of like a little bit of Bijan Robinson. And I know they both came from Texas, so it's easy to pick up on mannerisms like that when you're around a guy so much. But Jonathan Brooks, I think, could be was the first running back off the board, but could be considered a steal for Carolina if he comes back healthier than when he, went down with injury. But that Jordan Travis thing, I couldn't get over. I could not get over the fact that he fell to the fifth round.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, I think, is the knee thing. You know, the leg injury was pretty horrific, and I think it probably scared some teams off, and he wasn't able to test. And, you know, he was sort of a development project as a passer when he got to Florida State, and so I think people kind of have that in his head. But he became a pretty efficient passer his last couple of years at Florida State. Mike Norvell did a great job as a quarterback development guy there. One other guy that I really liked that I didn't bring up, and I hate to say this because it was a Steelers guy, and, you know, DB is going to be all over that, but I really liked the Roman Wilson pick, the wide receiver out of Michigan. That's a really he was really good. I don't know how, like, he was just a really good college player. If you're able to get that guy in the third round and just say, like, hey, we're going to count on some of that production being, you know, translating to the NFL level. He strikes me as a guy that is going to be useful on an NFL team. I don't know if he's going to be a number one or whatever, but like that's a guy that's going to make you better in your wide receiver room. And so in the third round, I thought that was a great pick too.
And to branch off of that, one more Michigan guy, and we got to stop giving Michigan some credit. But Zach Sinter, the offensive tackle that went to Cleveland, another steal for him to fall. Now, injuries, of course, and that's what you kind of get with a lot of, like, Roman didn't have injuries, but with a lot of these picks that go later that you're like, this guy could probably have been a middle second round pick. It happens to be injuries, but a unanimous All-American.
It's usually one of two things, right? Either a guy that would have gone higher that had injuries that people didn't feel like they got good answers to, or a guy that has really good production, but maybe their measurables aren't what you would want out of a top end, like first, early second round pick. And so you are basically taking a chance on something like the further down you get in the draft, right? You're taking more chances on things where it's like, I like the production, but I don't love the measurables. Or this guy's got incredible measurables, but he never really produced it the way that I thought he should have. Or like you said, this guy had a great career. We think he would have had good measurables, but he got injured late in his college career, and I don't really know what to do with that. Like, there's a lot of really good players. You see this every year, right? You end up with guys that are third, fourth, fifth round. I mean, Puka Nacua is a great example, right? Didn't have great measurables, but incredible wide receiver. You know, you see that all the time.
Those Polynesians, man. Those Polynesians can play football.
Absolutely. And so you just see that all the time where things that people think matter don't always matter. And you're going to end up getting steals because of it in the draft.
All right, Cam, we got to get you involved here. Mr. Kansas City Chiefs fan. You guys had one pick.
I don't want to hear about it.
You guys, he's like, I'm out of here.
You guys had one pick, Cam. Who was your one pick? Do you remember?
No, 32 in round one, right?
No. You guys traded that pick.
Oh, we traded. Okay.
Yeah, you gave it to Carolina.
Good for us.
Your second
great move.
Your second round pick is a guy by the name of, and I'm gonna butcher his last name, but he is.
Oh yeah, he's a bad boy though.
He's a Polynesian.
Yeah,
he's a bad boy though.
Bad boy.
His name is Kingsley.
Yep.
And it's like Swamatia or something like that. Can you tell me what position your boy plays?
I think he's a defensive back.
If he's a defensive back, he's a little overweight.
Okay. I have no idea. He's an offensive lineman.
He is an offensive
All
tackle. That a boy.
Ding, ding, ding.
326 pounds out of BYU. And
Man, if he's playing back at 320, that boy can move.
yeah. Well, we've seen a few of those in high school. Let's not kid ourselves. All right. Before we let Ravi go, because we kept him long enough and he's a busy man, not only does he do things on the radio every morning, he's also the business ops manager. Did I get that right at Hurrdat Sports?
You did, yeah.
Sometimes
On the business card.
Things don't leave. I want to ask him about the NBA playoffs just quickly, because as you look at the odds and how things are kind of tailing off at this point, Boston seems like the favorite and the best bet to make. And I can see it, one, because they have the best record in basketball, but two, because the East is always the East.
Total trash.
But then you look at some of these other teams, and I'm like, like this one. I think the Timberwolves are interesting to me in the West. That's a team where you're just like, they're doing some dangerous things. And Anthony Edwards getting compared to MJ in certain forms, I'm like, okay, whatever. But then again, comparisons happen everywhere. If you're a Nebraska football fan, he's getting compared to Patrick Mahomes. So these crazy comps just come out whenever there's big moments or whenever there's desperate moments. But you look at the T-Wolves, they're plus 800. The Thunder are plus 800. Shout out Joel Lorenzi. And the Nuggets are plus 370, who look just as good to run it back out of the West. Who does Ravi Lula, though, like at this point when you're looking at the standings and you're looking at all of these things and you're like, okay, this is who I would pick to win it all?
Yeah, so it's really hard not to pick Denver because they can do it. Like, we've seen it. We know that Jokic is a guy that's going to figure out how to attack whatever you throw at him defensively. Like, he's going to figure it out, right? I do think Jamal Murray is a little banged up, and that causes some concern. We saw in the first couple games against Minnesota how he got really kind of bullied defensively, and so if refs allow a game to be played that way, Denver might be in some trouble with a team that's able to do that. The team that I like the most, I think, is OKC. I like how they play. I like their versatility in different types of guys. I'm a huge Chet Holmgren guy. I thought he should have gone number one in the Paolo Banchero year, although Paolo's been great. I'm not hating on Paolo. But I'm a huge Chet Holmgren guy. He's super talented and has a super diverse skill set. And then you got SGA just with his weird, funky, herky-jerky game that is unguardable because he just throws you off rhythm so much. And then you've got guys like Lou Dort, who needs to hit some shots more consistently. You got your Jalen Williams. Like, this is a really interesting and well put together team. If it were a team that had been in the playoffs even a year, I'd feel way more confident about them. My only hesitation on OKC is that they're brand new, and like that very rarely happens where it's like, hey, first go, we got this thing. That's something that almost never happens, and so that's where I have this hesitancy with OKC. But if I'm just looking at teams I like the most, it's the Thunder.
So let's just say it's May 14th and you're looking at the final 8 teams in the NBA playoffs, and you have to give your lock, Ravi's fan pick, which I think he just gave with OKC, and the average fan's pick, or the non-traditional basketball fan that is just looking to support something at this stage when there's 8 teams left. Ravi's lock, Ravi's pick, like fan pick, and you can say OKC again, and the non-traditional average fan pick.
You can call it the Cam pick if you want to.
Oh, the Cam pick. Yeah, that's a great one.
Oh, Cam pick if he knew anything about basketball.
So, I mean, if I got to go lock, I probably got to go Denver. They've got the least question marks, and we know they can do it, right? My pick is OKC as far as what team that meets my eye the best. Although I will say, when Dallas is playing well, like, there's something about when Kyrie and Luka are playing well that is different. That I don't know that I wouldn't pick them to win the title, but I have to call that out. Like I love the way they've played down the stretch, and so let's say the winner of that series is my fan pick, the Thunder and Maverick series, and then I think the Cam pick is probably the Celtics.
Okay, fair enough. The favorite.
That's what I was going to say.
The favorite, Jason Tatum, product of St. Louis, Missouri. Jason Tatum. Side note, and this is just kind of a hey. I think this could be a fan pick too because you don't see this team too often. The Indiana Pacers. Tyrese Halliburton is fun to watch.
I would like to see them knock off the Knicks. I'd love to see them in the finals. I don't think anybody in the East can beat Boston. I don't think anybody's built that way. But I would love to see that. I love Tyrese Halliburton. That's the guy I wanted in, was it 2020 in that draft? When
he fell. Talk about a steal.
Yeah, he fell to 12. Most people thought he was going to go somewhere between like 6 and 9. And I wanted the Warriors to trade back from 2, where they ended up taking Weissman to go get Halliburton because I was obsessed with that.
You guys hit big with Weissman.
I don't want to talk about it, Andrew. But I was a huge Halliburton guy, so I would love to see him be successful. And lead them to a finals, but I don't think anybody's beaten Boston in the East.
I just hate looking at this bracket and thinking, where did the Bulls go? Oh yeah, the play-in Bulls. Where are they?
Hey, your Bulls and my Warriors both, buddy.
Ravi Lula, that is who he is. Great stuff, man. I appreciate you joining. We'll have you on as fall camp gets closer, maybe talk a little bit of Nebraska then and touch base on some of the things we talked about today. He's Cam Broham. You can catch Ravi on the air, as always, Monday through Friday, 7 to 10 on ESPN 590. If you miss it, catch up with the podcast, and that's Hurrdat Sports Radio. I'm Andrew Rogers saying so long. We'll see you next time on Rogers Rules.